The Fuse.
Hello, YouTube. Welcome back to The Fuse. Very quickly, I am going to talk to you about Unit 4, Topic 3 of AQA's Religious Studies module about the problem of evil. Those are all the things that you should know, be able to talk about. And essentially what we're talking about is this, that like bad stuff exists, and because bad stuff exists, surely that means all-powerful, all-knowing, perfect being can't exist. So yeah, what is it? What is evil? Is it any of these things? I like that it's almost unbearable. I think that's a good one, is to see it. Look how evil he is. What is evil? It's a conscious choosing to cause suffering to other people, or to oneself, actually. So that's what evil is. So what's suffering is feeling pain or distress or hardship, and that can be physical, emotional or mental. Many of us will have experienced extreme suffering watching things like Made in Chelsea and stuff like that. Also suffering. Don't mean to offend you. So an example of suffering there for physical, we could talk about cancer, or mental, depression or emotional heartache, or for social, homelessness. Of course, if you picked any one of those, like cancer is not just physical suffering, you suffer emotionally, so does your family, you might suffer mentally, you suffer socially. Lots of cancer charities help people with cancer with their financial difficulties. Yeah, so there's another debate about what is evil. Is it a personal force? You know, this idea of a devil or Iblis in Islam, some sort of personal force, or is it an impersonal force, like in Star Wars? That's why there's Darth Vader there. Or is it like a psychological phenomenon like Hannibal Lecter, or often in sort of Hollywood films as someone who's like, you know, mentally deranged and does evil stuff. The Joker in Batman, great example. And depending on what you think about evil's nature will depend how you respond to it. So there are lots of types of evil and suffering, and you need to know two main types, right? There's natural evil, which is things caused by natural disasters like hurricanes or earthquakes, stuff like that. And then there's moral evil, so that which is caused by human beings, like 9/11, or what ISIS are doing at the moment, or, you know, drone strikes that kill families instead of bad guys. Let's not talk about that, it's complicated. And that's caused by human beings' free will, right? So we choose to create suffering. That's sad, isn't it, that we do that? Yeah, but we do, I guess. So is this an inconsistent triad? That's kind of this idea that this is the problem for religious believers, is that if God is all good, so this is what omnibenevolent is, omnibenevolent, and all powerful, omnipotent, so if he can do anything he wants and he's all loving, how come evil exists? That's inconsistent, that doesn't make sense. Those three things shouldn't exist. Forgive my Java update thing. So the explanation in the case of human suffering is, of course, free will. Free will is the reason that evil exists, because humans do it. But with natural evil, why would God create a planet which, you know, has tectonic plates which rub up against each other and cause earthquakes and volcanoes and all sorts of bad stuff? It's like, it doesn't make sense. It's inconsistent. Epicurus summed it up well. If he's willing to prevent evil but not able, then he's not omnipotent. If he's able but not willing, then he's malevolent, which means evil. And if he is both able and willing, then why is there evil? If he's able to stop it and he wants to stop it, why isn't he stopping it? Come on, God, sort it out, mate. Then why call him God? If he can't do those things, then I guess it's not our idea of God. So that's the problem of evil for religious believers. So how do religious people respond to this? They might say there's a blessing in the storm, or they might say that life is always a test, which is from The Walking Dead, right? But actually that's something in Islam. It's this like this big belief that life is actually a test. You know, this life is a short glimpse in eternity, and it's a test to see if we're like worthy of paradise or not. Many Muslims believe that. A bit like this is a metaphor. I'll spend 10 seconds on it, that the refining pot for silver and the furnace for gold, but the Lord's test hearts. So somehow this life is like a furnace where we're being tested, a bit like gold is tested, but God is testing our hearts to see if we're a goodie or a baddie. A bit simplistic, maybe. It's a nice quote though, I think. Nice image too. The stronger the faith, the harder the test, the greater the rewards. Yeah, this idea that life is just like a test. I've already talked about it. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. So now we're talking about responses. So how should we respond to suffering? So this is religious responses that religious organisations like Tear Fund, CAFOD, Christian Aid, Islamic Relief, Muslim Aid. I talk about some of these in more detail in some of my other videos, like on world poverty. These are all organisations that actually do stuff to try and get rid of evil and suffering. And then you've got religious individuals like Malala Yousafzai, incredibly inspiring young Muslim woman who fought for women's rights to be educated worldwide, especially in Pakistan. And Gandhi and Martin Luther King. The people religious studies teachers always talk about, religious people who do good stuff. That is a religious response to evil and suffering. And then these really nice quotes, right? This idea that we shouldn't return evil with evil, that we should deal with them with kindness and forgiveness. Love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who mistreat you, says Jesus. This is a revolutionary idea, that you shouldn't just have revenge, you should really care for the people who are doing bad stuff, because they're the people who need the most help, right? The Buddha says similar things. Hatred does not cease by hatred, hatred ceases by love. It's an old idea, but revolutionary if it's applied. So religions have beliefs to try and prevent suffering in the first place. So in Islam you've got Sharia law, which is a religious law system. You've got the greater and lesser jihad. I'll make a video about jihad, it's a very interesting topic. Jihad does not mean holy war, it means struggle. So a struggle to be a better person, and if you're struggling to do that you shouldn't do evil stuff. Zakat, so giving money to a local fund to support people who are vulnerable, to prevent suffering in the first place. And Saum, fasting, similar thing at the end of Ramadan, people give food to each other, and the money you don't spend on food you should give to the poor. So these things are there in Islam to prevent suffering. And in Christianity you've got these teachings like an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. So you shouldn't do to others bad stuff, because then that will happen to you on some level. Although Jesus says that we shouldn't work like that, right? We should love our enemies. So the Bible's a bit weird. It's sort of like an Old Testament where there's quite a strict law about, there's revenge, don't mess up or you get messed up. And then Jesus is like, it's not quite like that. It's more about forgiveness and love. Bit of a tangent. God's work is perfect and all his works are just. So this idea that we should be just too, if God, has made us in his image, then ideally we're supposed to be just. And if that was true, if there was proper justice, there'd be very little human suffering in the world. And also this idea that we should give 10% of our money to church and or to charity, or both. Depends which Christians you talk to. So both of these religious systems have this idea of giving money to the vulnerable. For God will bring every act to judgment, everything which is hidden, whether it's good or evil. So in this, if this life is a test, justice comes later. God will act to judge us, whether it's good or evil, right? Do not take revenge, because the vengeance is mine, says the Lord, right? So it's this idea that it's not a place to take revenge on other human beings, that's God's place. This is kind of what I was saying before, that any form of suffering, depression, is not just an emotional or mental form of suffering. It affects your social life, it affects your physical well-being. All of these four things are caused by any form of suffering. So is it unjust? Or does suffering sometimes have a purpose? Sometimes we seem to think it does have a purpose in our society. We'll put people in solitary confinement. Sometimes in the United States, for years. Or you hear very dark stories about Saudi Arabia and places in the world where people are kept in solitary confinement for prolonged periods of time, because we seem to think that it's appropriate to cause suffering when someone else has caused suffering. So maybe it has a purpose. And the UK and the US government use techniques like waterboarding, which Amnesty International calls torture, because we believe it's a necessary part of suffering to get information from bad guys. Which is where you pour water onto a towel over someone's face. It gives a sensation of drowning, and then they'll talk to you, say anything. There's also this idea of karma, which you're supposed to know about, that you do good things happen to you, do bad stuff happens to you. So maybe that's a reason that suffering happens, that we've done bad stuff in this life or the last life, which has caused suffering. And explanations, right? So it might be this idea that as I say, the suffering is a result of a past life, as in karma, or it might be that God is testing us, refining us like gold. And I've heard some Christian scientists say, for natural evil, that God created this planet and it sustains life, and that's an amazing thing. But in order to do that, the plates needed to move around in order to share resources like minerals, and there needed to be a flow of lava to the surface for new land and stuff like that. So it was, the suffering in the short term seems incredibly bad, but in the long term, in the cosmic scheme of things, remembering God is outside of time, what seems like suffering to us might be beneficial in the long run. That's it. I hope that's really useful. If you've got questions, if something was unclear, if I spoke too fast, whatever, leave your comments. If you've got things that you'd like me to talk about, that's fine. If you'd like me to write songs about anything in particular, I'm happy to write and play songs for you guys. Thanks very much. I wish you loads of luck. There's some practice questions. Remember to answer the question. Don't go off on one. Just answer the question. If it's 3 marks, 2 explain points. If it's 5 marks, 3 explain points, maybe 4. Always answering the question, right? And responding in 6-mark questions to the statement itself, not to the idea, what do religious believers think about evil? But religious believers should always take action against evil, responding to that. Some people might agree that they should take action against evil. Some people might disagree they shouldn't take action. Okay? Okay? Good. Thank you for watching. I wish you a splendid life. All the best.